So Ellen DeGeneres ended her talk show abruptly right after allegations of a toxic workplace came out. But now she's back. She has a brand new comedy special. She says it will be her last. The group chat is here. You're going to hear what they think about Ellen's farewell. I'm Elamin Abdulmahmood. This is Commotion. Look, Ellen DeGeneres has a new Netflix special. It is called For Your Approval. It's the first stand-up special she's put out since the Ellen DeGeneres show ended. That is after allegations from staff that Ellen was responsible for creating a toxic workplace culture. I want you to hear just a little bit of the trailer.
All right, well, let me catch up on what's been going on with me since you saw me last. I decided to take up gardening. I got chickens. Let me see what else I can tell you about that's been going on. Oh, yeah, I got kicked out of show business.
Oh, yeah, I got kicked out of show business. Niko Stratis and Ashley Ray have both watched Ellen's new special. They're with me now. They have not been kicked out of show business. Ashley, Niko, welcome to the show, y'all. How's it going?
Welcome.
Great.
Glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
Glad to still be in show business. Niko, I'm going to start with you on this one. Look, before we get to the special, I think I want to maybe root us in like what Ellen has meant. So just take us back to Ellen DeGeneres that we knew before the scandals about her talk show. What did her success represent, would you say?
I mean, I'm sort of this perfect age demographic, which is very rare when you're in your 40s. But Ellen came out in 1997 when at a time when there wasn't a lot of queer representation that was sort of positive. A lot of what we saw in mainstream media was they were victims or they were easy punchlines. I mean, think of every homophobic trope dressed up as a character on Friends, these were the people. And then so Ellen coming out and saying, yep, I'm gay on the cover of Time magazine, this was a big thing. We didn't see this a lot. And it really sort of created this new ground of you can be gay and you can be relatable and you can be funny and you can be the star of a thing, or it sort of allowed this changing conversation, which gave us Will and Grace is a year after this. We sort of started this new conversation on what a queer character could be on TV. But this is what that meant, and then it just sort of all sort of spiraled from there. Of you can have success, which was maybe sort of more unheard of before that.
The quintessential line he always hears are my mom or my dad, who is a little bit homophobic, while they still like Ellen. They still sort of root for Ellen in a different way. She sort of changed the conversation for a lot of queer comedians in that way. And then you get to this special. A lot has happened before we get to the special, Ashley. But you get to the special. The special is called For Your Approval. You're a comedian, just strictly from a sort of a stand-up point of view. How do you feel about For Your Approval, Ashley?
I mean, Ellen has not forgotten how to do stand-up. A lot of, those big names from the 90s, they reached a level of just, this is how it is done. She has that level of professionalism. She can do a 5-minute bit about chickens flying or parking, just really mundane stuff that wouldn't be outside, out of place at a comedy club in 1999 or 1998. Yeah. She could do that and still make it funny. There were a few lines that got me, even when it came to those more boring parts that weren't about what happened. Yeah. But there's just sort of a shocking, just lack of awareness of what people might be there to see. She's so defensive throughout most of it in a room full of people who are just so ready and willing to clap for her. And I think when we talk about sort of how she was canceled, really there were so many people who were in support of her, who were like, she doesn't need to leave her show. But that was really kind of Ellen's response, was that she was like, well, if you guys don't like me, I'm going to take my ball and go home. And that's what this special feels like.
When you say a 5-minute bit about parking, you literally mean that. There is a 5-minute bit about parking.
Parallel parking.
About parallel parking. And here's the thing, she's, to me, Niko, I don't know how you felt about this, but to me, she is at a level of sort of comedy competence that I was laughing most of the way through that bit. I was like, maybe I would have cut it a little short, a little bit sooner than this. Yeah. But it was working for me. At least the first 25 minutes of that special worked really well for me. Niko, how did you feel about watching For Your Approval?
I mean, you sort of go into it knowing the conceit of it in the and we hear that in the trailer is like her saying, "I got kicked out of Hollywood," which isn't true. She got paid $20 million to make the show. Look, no one kicks you out and then sends you a check for $20 million. That's like, I wouldn't be kicked out of more stuff if that's how getting kicked out works. So like the whole time, like, you know, talking about this, like the windshield wiper bit and the parallel parking bit, that's the lead up before she gets into what happens. So the whole time I'm watching, they're like, these jokes are okay. They're funny enough. They're not like amazing. They're not blowing my socks off, and I'm chuckling and I'm doing the dishes and I don't really care what's going on. And like, she's going to talk about it eventually. And then she does. And I'm just like, wait, what? Like, it just feels so disconnected because nothing really sort of seamlessly runs into each other. It's like two different things happening at the same time.
Okay, it may be useful at this point to remind people, Ashley, how Ellen got into hot water to begin with. Because let's be honest, the reason that people are watching this special is because it's the first time that we're hearing from Ellen after she, quote unquote, got kicked out of show business. That's according to her. Why did she get into hot water in the first place, Ashley?
Yeah, I like to put it all on Dakota Johnson, the young actress who was on the Ellen DeGeneres show.
That's not the truth, Ellen. Yeah, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, that's not the truth, Ellen. You know, they're talking about how Ellen says she wasn't invited to her birthday party. Dakota was like, you were invited. The internet kind of goes crazy trying to figure out, well, where was Ellen? Why did she not go to the party? They find out she was at a game in Texas with George Bush. That created a backlash where people were like, you know, she says she's gay, she supports us, why is she with George Bush? And from there, a podcaster was like, hey, I will match donations if people tell me bad stories about Ellen. It's an open secret in Hollywood that she is a monster to work with. And other celebrities, Brad Garrett, other people from sitcoms you don't remember came out and were like, it's so true. Everybody knows this.
Very famous people got involved in this, right? Like they were like, yeah, we had a hard time working with Ellen, right?
Yeah, like pretty big names that were like, oh, wow, her coworkers really don't like her. But again, there were people who stood by Ellen. You know, there were her DJ, Samantha Ronson, a bunch of people who were like, hey, you know, she's always nice to me. But then BuzzFeed does this in-depth expose looking at the culture of the Ellen show. And beyond Ellen, there were producers who were accused of sexual assault. There were people who, you know, were PAs worked on the crew who just described an environment of fear, toxicity, not being able to look Ellen in the eyes. And as soon as all of this sort of came out, there were calls for her to get fired, to leave the show. And she sort of said, I have a reputation of being kind. That's my whole thing. Yeah. And now that's gone. And I think in this new special, you feel the embarrassment that she kind of feels in letting people down, that she makes fun of being called sort of the nation's babysitter, but actually she loved being the nation's babysitter. And when that was taken away from her, she just sort of decided to cancel the whole show and walk away. So it's rough to even say she was, you know, canceled or kicked out of Hollywood, because again, she just sort of said, I'm going home. You guys are being mean to me, actually. And just disappeared.
First, let me say, shout out to Christy Andoli, formerly of BuzzFeed News. She's the person who broke that story for BuzzFeed. She got like dozens of sources on the record from people who used to work on that show and were current employees of that show to talk about their experience with Ellen. And there was sort of like a uniformity to the way that people were talking about her. She does address some of the stuff about the toxic workplace allegations. Here's a bit of what she says in the special.
I was a very immature boss. Because I didn't want to be a boss. I didn't go to business school. I went to Charlie's Chuckle Hut. I mean, it looked like I was the boss. The show was called Ellen, and everybody was wearing T-shirts that said Ellen, and there were buildings all over the Warner Brothers lot that said Ellen. But I don't think that meant that I should be in charge. Like, I don't think that Ronald McDonald's the CEO of McDonald's.
Okay, it's a funny line, Niko, but I just want to know.
Sure.
I just want to know how you felt about the way that Ellen handled these accusations in the special.
Oh, terribly. Like, you know, I sort of wanted to like see if she could have any sort of self-awareness about it at all and be like, look, my public perception is like America's babysitter, right? Like, I'm funny and I dance. Like, she even talks about it. Like, I dance every day and I have a DJ and like everybody knows it's like this fun, lighthearted thing. And like, if that's not who you are off camera, you know, there's a juxtaposition there. And if that gets called out or brought to light, you know, you can have some sort of self-awareness about it, be like, look, I struggled with it or whatever, like take a little bit of responsibility, but to immediately shuffle that off and say like, well, I wasn't the boss just because my name is on the show. Like, but you were in a position of power and influence, and that carries some weight. And to just ignore that and make a joke about it and say, you know, the bit, like, it is funny to say Ronald McDonald's not the CEO of McDonald's, but what if he was? Then he would be responsible. And that's Ronald McDonald's not real, but Ellen is real. And she had a very real position, and that position got abused and people suffered from it. And like, to just sort of put all that out to pasture and say, well, look, I'm the real victim here because people were mean to me. So I had to walk away from it and accept this paltry $20 million special. It's just like, the whole time I was like, okay, eventually she's going to take some ownership over it. And the fact that she couldn't, I think, speaks volumes.
I do want to get to, Ashley, the idea that one thing that I think I sense in the special is she's saying, I was held to standards that I'm not sure you're holding the men to. I'm not sure you're holding other people to in Hollywood. I think there's some validity in that. I think, like, you know, we know of all kinds of stories of other people who have hosted shows who have been very difficult to work with. The response to them isn't the same, but maybe it's because of the emotionality. This idea of like the relationship of you have a relationship with Ellen's brand of kindness. You have a relationship with Ellen's brand of, you know, babysitter thing. What do you make of her pushback of saying, hang on, we're not applying these standards entirely evenly here?
Yeah, I mean, that is fair. There is a double standard as a queer woman. You know, she does have a good point when she goes into, as a woman boss, people don't expect you to be direct. And it's like, okay, sure, Ellen, but that's not what the people who were working for you said was the issue. They weren't saying that you were just girl bossing too hard. They said they were afraid to look you in the eye because they thought they could get fired or punished in some way. And that's a little bit more than just like being a tough boss. It just also seems like a lot of their complaints were on the culture and just toxicity that came from her and her attitude. And, you know, part of me thought maybe when she addresses this, you know, everybody being like, actually, she's mean, that she might joke around and kind of be mean in the special, you know, let us see that level of meanness. And she doesn't. She kind of avoids all accountability around that. But there is one joke at the beginning where she says, people will ask me, I don't understand how you did a talk show every day. That's so much work. How did you do it? And she goes, I don't know how you dry clean. And it's like just this moment of being condescending, a total dick that you're like, oh, that's the real Ellen. and it's also one of the funniest joke to me in the special, because I was like, oh, you have actually said that to a dry cleaner. I can feel that you have said this. And so I think if she had kind of embraced that more, people might be more willing to say, okay, yeah, this is her taking accountability. But instead, the whole thing just feels overindulgent. It is just an excuse for her to sort of look at her legacy and go, aren't I great? Don't you kind of miss me? Don't you wish I was back? Isn't it so sad what those sensitive people who were mean to me did? And it's really, you know, not as entertaining as what could have been if she had just sort of embraced this darker side.
Yeah, I would have wanted to see that. I would have wanted to see, like, what does it look like if Ellen sort of lets the whole thing out? You know, whatever that whole thing is. Because I do think, Niko, there's something to be said about the fact that, like, before Ellen was famous, it's not like Hollywood was a kind place to someone like Ellen, a queer woman. Sure. It would not have been a particularly welcoming place for her in that particular environment. And I think there is this pressure, especially if you're a minority in Hollywood, to present the least threatening, the most sort of palatable version of yourself in order to succeed, in order to get ahead. And that means sort of having to, like, soften your edges in many ways. What role do you think that played in how we ended up here right now?
Oh, I'm sure that sort of, you know, hardened her a little bit, right? Like, you know, it's not like she came out as gay and everything was great, you know, like she had a hard, you know, her career sort of like struggled a little bit after that. I should also say that Laura Dern, who was the woman who was in the episode with her when she came out, who was her queer love interest, Laura Dern has also said that her career suffered for a good 2 years afterwards. Like, this is a very real thing. And I have to imagine that sort of follows you, and you sort of worry that, like, if I step out of line or if I do something wrong or whatever, like, sure, those things can harden you over time, but like, that's 30 years ago. Like at a certain point, you either have to learn to let that stuff go, or you can start using it as a shield to deflect all responsibility and sort of hiding behind, well, I'm a woman, I'm gay. Like, how could you be mean to me? I'm literally a woman and gay. Like, that doesn't let you get away with these things. At a certain point, you have responsibility, and it's, you know, you're a massively wealthy white woman in Hollywood. You know, you have a level of power and responsibility, and it's up to you to sort of like take ownership of that.
I'm literally a woman and gay is going to stick around with me as the phrase for this episode. But I got to leave it there. Niko and Ashley, you guys are the best. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Ashley Ray is a comedian and podcaster in LA. She hosts the show TV I Say. Niko Stratis is a freelance culture critic and writes the newsletter Anxiety Shark in Toronto. Ellen DeGeneres' new Netflix special is called For Your Approval, and it is out now. I'm Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Look, we talk a lot about like fancy prestige TV on the show, but we don't often talk about network television, and this changes today. It changes today because the show that premiered last week, we are all over it.
Assistance, please. I have an unresponsive patient.
Heart rate is dropping.
Stay with me.
It's your job.
Okay, we gotta move fast.
You're gonna be safe. I'm gonna get through this.
To keep everyone alive. I'm in.
That is from the trailer for Doctor Odyssey, which set a record. Just that trailer set the record for the most watched trailer for a new broadcast TV show ever. 77 million views in just 48 hours. This is a show that stars the Canadian legend, Joshua Jackson, who plays a doctor on a luxury cruise ship. It is one of 6 Ryan Murphy shows that are coming out this month, and the vibe seems to be like ER meets Love Boat. The show's tagline is literally big deck energy. There's so much to talk about. Kathryn VanArendonk is here. She has seen Doctor Odyssey. I'm so delighted in how much you're delighting in this, Kathryn. Nice to see you.
It's so good to see you.
I love seeing you as you prepare to talk about this show. I could see that you're just like, even before the premiere happened, you were just like, I'm curious, I'm here, I'm seated. Why? What brought you in?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple things going on. One, as you mentioned, it is a Ryan Murphy show. I have been, to say mixed is perhaps generous about the last several years of Ryan Murphy, but this is the kind of Ryan Murphy that I really do respond to well. It's this sort of big network, sort of for the masses, populist kind of thing. It for me is the best version of what he does. So there's that element of it. There is, of course, the Joshua Jackson element of it. It has been a while since he has been a lead on a show, a big network show like this. I also think Doctor Odyssey, even based on the trailers, you could tell there, you know, we had this huge Dawson's Creek moment. Joshua Jackson absolutely has been busy and working since then, but it's like you needed this space for him to age into daddy. And and now that he's there, you're like, oh my God, it makes sense again. Like, we're here, we're ready. The moment has arrived.
Yes.
And in the episode, it's very much like he walks onto the ship and everyone goes like, oh my God, like, is that the doctor?
Literally from the moment you see him in the episode. Okay, what I loved about the show, I watched it last night at 1 a.m, which is exactly the correct, time of night to watch Doctor Odyssey and just get filled with delight. Do you want to talk about the first episode? What'd you think now that it's out?
I had a great time. I had an absolutely great time. Almost nothing happens in the episode of any kind of import, and that's perfect.
Yes.
Don Johnson plays the captain. He's like, our other doctor left and we have to get a new doctor in. And so Philippa Sue is sort of she's a nurse practitioner, which she corrects people about several times. And she's like, who could it possibly be? And it's Joshua Jackson. And he shows up and he's like, what's this cruise ship medicine you have to do? I'm a real doctor. And then he doesn't understand when a guy eats too much shrimp and gets iodine poisoning. And
it's called Seal's disease. disease, I believe,
It
as
is
people were
not.
Okay.
If you Google Seals disease, the internet has literally never heard of this before.
Yeah, in the show
Anyhow,
they
but
call it Seals disease. It is not a real thing. Okay.
no,
Yeah.
yeah. And Philippa Sue is like, see, it's cruise medicine. And then within 20 minutes, they're all on a beach having a love triangle dance off for no reason at all.
Except for your
And
entertainment.
yeah, well, I mean, for no reason except for the best possible reason, which is that they're all on this beach just dancing and kissing, and then they go back on the cruise ship and somebody has an accident with his penis.
Yeah.
And so like this is what
The
this show
second patient in this show has
Yeah.
has a penile fracture
Yes.
on his honeymoon, you know?
Yes. It's terrible. Yeah.
But what I love about the show is that everything that we're saying about it is usually the thing that we say to maybe dismiss network television, but it's also the thing that is good about network television is that like there is just a sweeping amount of joy in watching this. It is that over the top. It is that ridiculous. His shirts really are that pressed in every moment. You know, like there's something like really joyous to me that feels like I haven't seen this much joy in watching network television in a minute. Am I off base here?
You are absolutely not. And I think Doctor Odyssey is kind of the pinnacle of it, but I have noticed it for multiple network dramas this year.
Okay.
There's also High Potential, which stars Caitlin Olsen, and Matlock. The Matlock reboot is getting a lot
Kathy
of people
Bates.
being like
Yeah.
so excited about it. And so I think, yes, I think there is two things. One is that those three shows are actually better than a lot of network dramas have been in the past several seasons.
Yeah.
But I also think we are in this pendulum swing moment where people are like, you know what? I'm kind of tired with prestige sort of up its own buttness. Like I kind of also want Doctor Odyssey. Where did those shows go? And it took TV a little while to get back to it.
Yeah.
And it has been really so exciting to watch the audience response to finally having just like stupid TV that loves being TV again.
It has gotten a little hard, I would say, Kathryn, to like keep recommending like industry to people. You know, to be like, hey, you know what you should really watch is Slow Horses. Great shows. Really love those shows. They ask a lot of you. They ask a lot of you in ways that like TV has kind of felt like homework. And then the minute that I saw Joshua Jackson's face, because he sort of steps into the cruise ship and like the doors open and then he walks on top of this deck. And I was like, oh, this is what TV's supposed to be. Like there is there's like a reminder of the kind of thing you can get from television that you don't usually get if you're watching all those prestige shows.
Yeah, or any other medium. And I think it's very, very important to tell everyone listening right now that he does have a different name. The character has a name, but nobody calls him that name. Within 20 minutes of the episode, they call him Doctor Odyssey.
They do. It's wonderful because I actually forgot his name by the end of the first episode.
Yeah.
I was like, no, he's just Dr. Odyssey to me now.
Yes.
How much is Joshua Jackson the selling point in this show, do you think?
You know, he's clearly a huge part of why this show works. It would not work if you were getting a kind of less twinkly-eyed face into this role, because he has to be able to contain the silliness without breaking. It's very important to this show working that he plays this totally straight, which he absolutely does, and it's fantastic. But you know, this is not the first, like Peter Krause plays a similar role on Ryan Murphy's 911. It's that kind of older, he's very muscled, his shirts are so ironed, his pants are quite tight. And so, you know, I think we are just reminding ourselves of this kind of role and how much excitement there is to just have something this silly.
I should tell you, on this very network, the network that I work for, okay, the type of show that you're talking about, this the Doctor Odyssey, it made me think of something else. CBC Gem, which is our streaming network, recently announced 2 separate streaming channels. One is going to be dedicated to Heartland only, Heartland. And then the other one is to Murdoch Mysteries, 24 hours a day. Both shows have been running for like 17 seasons at this point. I'm not saying that Dr. Odyssey's gonna run for 17 seasons, but there's something with this kind of TV that is like, that's what we want to respond to right now. What do you think that is?
I think, as we were talking about this need for TV that just it acknowledges that it is television and it does not have this same kind of demanding quality. But that's not to downplay the fact that these shows can't speak to us. People watch Murdoch Mysteries, and yes, you don't have to turn your brain all the way on. And still, when you're like cooking or folding laundry, you look over and you're like, oh, like that is a sad story, and I'm sort of moved by it. And then we get something and we can move on with our lives. And this is what Doctor Odyssey does for us, and I'm so happy we all have it.
I'm never going to move on from Doctor Odyssey. I really appreciate this conversation. Kathryn VanArendonk, thank you for your time, friend. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Anytime. Okay, Kathryn VanArendonk is a TV critic for Vulture. She's in New Jersey. Doctor Odyssey airs on Thursdays on CTV and ABC. You can also stream it on Crave and Disney+. Please do that so that I can talk to you about it. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. I'll be here tomorrow, so if you'll be here, I'll see you then.